thanks everybody for coming. I'm Marty Mannion. I'm running the search committee for the new Berklee president. This is Mary Gorman from our search firm, Spencer Stuart. And this is, I guess, our probably 6th or 7th listening session. And we've had some great sessions in the past. Our goal is to kind of get your input on what you think we should, the qualities we should look for in the next president of Berklee. To give you a little update of where we are, so we're hoping to have the job description done by early next week. It may be a little earlier, but it's in good shape. We've been working on it. We've used a lot of the input from the listening sessions to kind of to frame the job description. That will be posted on the website. We'd encourage everybody to read it. We'd encourage people to read the description of the type of person we're looking for, and if you have any suggestions, there's a email that you can send suggestions in to Spencer Stuart, and they will search those people out and help us vet them.
Oh, there it is, right there, Berklee Press.
At spencerstuart.com. With that, I'll turn it over to Mary. We have a series of questions that we've used to frame these discussions in the past, but with a small size of crowd today, we hope this turn into kind of a dinner conversation on what you would hope to see in the qualities of the next president. So
Terrific.
Mary?
Thank you all for coming. Thanks for taking your time to come meet with us. And whenever we kick off a search, it's just really important that we spend a lot of time on campus. And we've done a number of listening sessions. We've really tried as much as we can to meet with and speak with a real wide range of all the people that for whom Berklee is a really important place: students and faculty and staff, administrators. Yeah. Do we need to use our mics?
Because of the streaming, if you can use the mic, otherwise I don't think people will be able to hear it.
Great.
Is this working? No, let's see.
Yep.
It works? Okay, great. So whenever we start a search, as I was saying, we really want to hear from as many different stakeholders at the institution as possible, and that just gives us we learn more about the institution as we're going to go out there and speak on your behalf, and it also helps us listen better as we're interviewing people and meeting people to get a good sense about whether or not they have the skills and competencies, the attributes that you're really seeking in your next president. So these are the questions that have guided our conversations. What are the challenges and opportunities facing the next president of Berklee today and over the likely tenure? And then the second, what do you think needs to be preserved at Berklee? What shouldn't change? What is it about Berklee that makes Berklee so special that you want to hang on to that no matter who the next leader is? The third one, if you're setting the agenda, that pretty much gets covered in the first question we found, but we've kept the questions fairly consistent. And then, given your response to those questions, what are we looking for? Sort of paint a picture for us of the skills, the backgrounds, the attributes. What's it like? What may be on the person's resume, and what's it like to meet with that person and spend time with that person? So, with that introduction, why don't we talk first about what do you see are the opportunities and challenges, and if for the next president of Berklee? And I'm going to be taking notes just because I want to share them with my colleague, share with the search committee. And if you don't mind, if you could tell me a little bit or tell us a little bit about yourself, if you're a student, in what program, what year, et cetera. That would just be helpful for context. Okay, great. Thoughts about Berklee itself?
My name is Fritz Kunlins. I'm the Senior Director for Alumni Affairs for the college and the conservatory. So I think, at least from my vantage point in working with our alumni community, there is this push and pull, which I see as a challenge and also an opportunity, but the push and pull between remaining a small, private, exclusive opportunity that Berklee possesses, and then also bringing sort of the knowledge of Berklee, the wisdom of Berklee, and the pedagogy out to the masses. I think of that sort of at the intersection of everything going on in higher education in terms of being a small private institution where you look sort of left and right and places are closing left and right or merging with larger institutions to become these larger conglomerates. So I think finding that balance or understanding that balance is a challenge and opportunity, and sort of echoes down through those questions. I see Berklee expanding, globally, and I think that's a wonderful thing, in my personal view. But also, how are we sort of maintaining our core here in Boston? There's a strong contingent in the alumni community that are jazz cats. They came here, that's what they do, that's what this place means to them, and being able to translate that idea of what jazz is, both sort of instrumentally but also philosophically, is something that we're trying very hard on our team to do, to say, jazz is about improvisation, and improvisation in 1950 looks very different than it does in 2020, and how do we sort of preserve that?
If others want to talk about challenges or about what makes Berklee special, I mean, we got a little bit of both in that comment. So,
I think what makes Berklee really special is the diversity, not only in the students but also the teachers. So here, when you do ensembles of specific music, the teachers are from those areas, and so it's very authentic knowledge that is being given to the students. But I think one of the challenges for Berklee, and I'm a student right now at Berklee, so maybe this is a very specific challenge that I think is a challenge, but I think some of the courses at Berklee are not up to date with what's happening in the actual music world. In terms of, like, for example, with music business, we have certain classes where it's still a little dated, I think, and it's not up to date with what is currently happening. And I feel like that is always going to happen because music and technology is evolving so fast at this point. But I feel like if we could find a balance of those two, of keeping up with what is happening currently in the industry.
Can I jump in here? Mary, you must run into that question all the time as a search firm. How do you find candidates, or what do you look for in candidates that you think will help them keep a vision of the future?
To look back, the best indicator of whether somebody can do something in the future is what they've done in the past. And so when you look at people who have a career path or a career history which shows them innovating and trying new things, they may not all work, but at least being open to trying things. And I think the second thing that we would probably look for is somebody who knows that they are not the repository of all good ideas, because innovation and good forward thinking usually comes with people talking and thinking together and gaining that the value and of collaborative knowledge. And then I think setting expectations too for the institution, that we just in supporting faculty members as they look to keep their courses really current.
Hi, my name is Rosemary, and I work in the admissions office. And I think the biggest challenge that I see for Berklee is that we are no longer the only option for our students anymore. For a really long time, we were the contemporary music institution, but now students have many, many choices. The New School, NYU, Belmont, what have you. So we can't really ride on that anymore. And I think that is affecting if students see Berklee as affordable, because we're very expensive, and now students, they have all these other choices of places that they can go. In the most recent alumni survey that came out, one section of it that really jumped out to me was that students who receive scholarship are more likely to be working in the arts after graduation than students who borrow to cover their Berklee education. And I think that plays into the choice for students. You know, if they're looking at this college and we're asking them to spend, you know, $73K plus a year, they may go somewhere else because they have these other options now. So I think Berklee needs to continue to innovate and continue to be cutting edge so that we can justify that cost and continue to recruit the best students. So that's what I see.
So, quick question, a little off this subject, but does the next president need to be a musician? I see two no's. Any thoughts on that, of what the, you know, kind of qualities? Yep.
I would just say I don't necessarily think that the next president needs to be a musician, but I think that there needs to be this deep appreciation for the industry, for the arts, that it is a part of them. Perhaps that they are a musician on the side, right? 80% of our alumni community, you know, continue to play, continue to be musicians, even though they're doing many different things from 9 to 5. But to be able to speak that language, I think will add to make their assimilation much easier into the community and give them some level of authenticity.
Others, any other thoughts on that question?
Hi again. I actually think my biggest fear with who is chosen as the new president will be just some big name industry artist that's selected for name only. So I agree that an appreciation of music is really important, but I hope that past experience in higher education or in leading a large and extremely complex organization is valued more so than just like a huge pop star, a huge jazz star, something that's brought in. That's definitely my biggest fear.
Yeah, I would say that while sort of going off of what Fritz said, it doesn't need to be a musician per se, but, you know, because we also include the conservatory, you know, dancer, actor, somebody involved in the arts. And I think somebody who's like done it, even if it hasn't been ever like a career choice, but that like it's always sort of been a part of their life. And like that was something I discovered about myself coming to Berklee, was that I didn't realize how much music has been a part of my life until I worked here. And then I was like, oh no, of course this makes sense because music is everywhere in my life. And then like by working here, it sort of like brought that to the forefront. So I think that if that weren't true for the person with the arts, if the arts hasn't always been a part of their life, then it would sort of be a non-starter.
This isn't related to the piece about a musician, but my name's Jacqueline Calavine. I work in the equity office, and I think something that Roger Brown has done really well is just be present with our students, and our students are very active, and student activism is a big part of why the equity office exists, and a big part of why positioning diversity, equity, and inclusion has become a real part of the fabric of the institution and setting our priorities. And so I think there's still so much work to be done there. We're set up well considering other places I've worked, but I think we have a lot of work to do, and I think the next president needs to sort of take that work to the next level. Everything from not just diversity, but inclusion and belonging and social justice and what that looks like in hiring and our student population and equity of opportunity and relationships between our community members. There's a lot of work to be done, and I would hope that the next president can sort of take what Roger has done and really bring that to the next level.
So I am Laszlo Gardoni. I am a piano professor, and I'm also on the search committee. And the reason I'm talking now, not necessarily for myself, because I have a chance to talk to the search committee about my vision for our next president, but I asked the faculty to send me their wishes, opinions about this process. And I just want to basically explain what I heard, because I wanted that to be part of the conversation. A lot of people felt that it's very important that the next president should have a love and appreciation of academics and music itself. It was divided whether the person should be a musician, an artist, or just somebody who loves art and music education. And I think the biggest fear was that the school has grown so much that to consolidate what we have, the many campuses, the many programs, it's quite a big task for somebody who comes in from the outside, because we are a very innovative school, not just in our educational model, but also the way we expand it. I think it doesn't happen in most music school that it becomes so globally engaged. So I think it also was understood that the person has to manage very well, the senior management has to have a good rapport with them, and also have to be able to oversee a large organization. But obviously we are all musicians, so the connection to music and the connection to jazz for a lot of them, faculty members, I mean including myself, is very important, because the improvisational nature of the school keeps us open to a lot of communication between students, between faculty, that is not necessarily present at other institutions. We are a very open society here in a sense of sharing our creativity with each other.
Thanks, Laszlo. Quick question on that. So, all of you know Roger was a non-traditional candidate. You know, didn't show up on the original screens from the search firms and came from a an entrepreneurial background. And Laszlo touched on this in his points. Do people think we need to find somebody who looks like Roger 2.0 on one end, or do we need to find an educator, somebody from a current educational institution, or do we need to find a mix? And the reason I ask the question, the search committee is going to look under all of those rocks to try to find somebody. But what do people think is the right place to? If you were doing it on your own, where would you look first? In the back.
Thank you. I think it's important to have a mix, because sometimes if you come from just an educational background, I mean, I'm not saying just to like put the person down, but maybe you can get stuck in that, like educational system background. And if you get someone who has a little bit of entrepreneurial experience as well, maybe they can push the envelope a bit more to maybe, because like you said, like Berklee, I don't know any other college that's as diverse and has all these like global things happening all over the world as Berklee does. And so I feel like you need someone who can think about all of that as well as academics and the institution. So I think it should be someone who's a good mix of the two.
I think too, with sort of future of higher ed and looking at sort of, somebody had mentioned, Berkeley is an expensive institution, and I think as we look creatively about sort of keeping ourselves competitive in like the music and performing arts, world of education, but also just higher ed in general, I think that we need to think really creatively about sort of what a college provides and what it looks like and what it does and how it provides that. And so I think, if it's an educator sort of traditionally it needs to be somebody with a proven record of questioning and reinventing that. And similarly, if it's an entrepreneur, I tend to sort of be on the same page as Anushka that it needs to be somewhere in the middle. But I don't think that Berklee will be successful in the long run unless we sort of are at the forefront of reinventing how education is provided. Because I think that families are questioning sort of that ROI of, sort of the traditional college route more and more.
Let me ask one more question that was embodied in Laszlo's comments. We've heard in the listening that there's two different thoughts on how the school should grow, which is we've been going at this breakneck speed right now. We have a million things going on. We have, seeds planted all over the place, and we need a president to stop and say, let's grow these things and let's stop planting seeds, in other places or other subjects or whatever. And then the other side of the conversation is people are like, no, that's what made Berklee great, was we just kept on going and we ran and some stuff grew and other stuff didn't grow, but net, it's been a really positive experience. Any thoughts on kind of where on those boundaries you might think we should be thinking the next president should be looking?
Thanks for putting me on the spot. I think all the programs we have are wonderful, and the great diversity of programming is really helpful to the student experience and being able to get whatever they want here, imagining their future, and being able to do it here first, right? I do think there should be maybe additional staff support, planned for, growing programs and things that if we're going to keep growing, we should also consider how they'll be supported long-term, rather than just continue to plant seeds without adding more topsoil. Oh, sure. I'm Jamie Davis. I'm Associate Director of Performance Division Programs.
I think it's very hard to sort of say that you're going to go back in a way. When you sort of think about the many generations of Berklee, of the college, and also, I think in some ways, the conservatory as well, we sort of were this small business, family run, sort of, that grew to a certain extent, and then sort of Roger came in and added sort of a corporate nature to the family business, sort of franchised it out, and now he's sort of taken that to the next level of this enterprise, and that requires sort of a different skills base. So to say that we're going to go back on a certain element, I think is a little difficult. I guess sometimes, hearing about, because I too hear about sort of that rush, that speed at which sort of Berklee tries to progress in all things. I wonder if, there does need, I think there does need to be some sort of consolidation in some factors. I think especially around sort of the experience of being a student, the experience of the many different communities, whether you're a student, a faculty, a staff, and maybe that's on the educational side or the student experience side. But I do think that sort of a wing of Berklee has to be reserved for that enterprising notion, because that's part of our brand, that's part of sort of our DNA of the institution. So that's my thought.
Any other characteristics that you'd like to see, kind of personal, on a personal side? We talked a bit about some professional backgrounds. Yeah.
Excuse me. Someone over here mentioned, I don't remember who, about how accessible Roger has been to the students. And I really, this sounds so silly, but just someone who's super friendly and easy to talk to. One thing that always struck me about Roger when I was a student, if I ran into him in an elevator, he would always ask, "What's your name? What do you play? What are you majoring in?" You know, and even though he may not have remembered me for the next time he saw me, it really made me feel special as a person. Be like, "Oh my God, it's the Berklee president. He wants to know who I am. Like, how cool is that?" So I would really love to see someone who is that easy to speak to, even though they're the president of a college. I remember I emailed him about something once when I was a student, and he responded personally, you know, and that really struck with me. And even 10 years later, I remember that. So just someone who is there for the students, there for the faculty, there for the staff, and someone who I feel like I can approach is really important to me and something that I would really like to see in the next president.
I'd really love to see them have sort of an innate curiosity about all things. We all work, sort of live and play in a place where you can pretty much do anything with a Berklee degree. You can be a vice president of Google. You know, a couple weeks ago, I met someone who is helping to preserve the Mayan language in Mexico City in the form of rap. Because if they can make it into music, then that will help preserve sort of a dying and decaying language. And I've seen Roger, and this is sort of speaking to the Roger 2.0, sort of whether or not that exists. I don't think it has to necessarily be a Roger 2.0, but he has that curiosity and that openness to say, you know, you can do anything in the music universe and or otherwise. And I'd love to listen. I'd love to learn about it.
Anything else that you came here wanting to make sure that we heard? Sort of outside of these questions, or maybe, yeah, go for it.
You know, I work in a department, so this is a loaded question. I work in a department that is embedded within development. So fundraising is a huge component that I'm always mindful of. And I think sort of in the preservation of the pedagogy, in the preservation of the technology, as we sort of are trying to progress, I just hope that the next, this is my hope, right? I hope that the next president that's selected is familiar, comfortable, ready to go in terms of their development chops, because that underpins sort of all of our dreams here.
Mary, I've heard you speak about finding candidates who are good at development. I think the room might be interested in some of your thoughts about that, because I've learned a lot from hearing you talk about that.
Yeah, no, thank you, Melissa. I mean, I think that sometimes you have a candidate that has a track record. You know, I've raised this much money, increased the annual giving at my institution, or raised money for these specific capital needs, be they, you know, or endowment needs and things like that. So sometimes you'll get somebody who's got a track record. And that's typically someone who's already sat as president of a nonprofit organization, or somebody who has perhaps sat on a board and been fundraising through the board. There are also a lot of people who never fundraised before they became a president. I mean, I don't know how much fundraising experience Roger had. I mean, he'd raise money for his business, but that's different than raising money from philanthropists. And he maybe has served on a board. But if you hire somebody who's not yet a president, it's their fundraising experience is probably going to be not. They don't have a great track record. So what you look for then is somebody who can, you know, develop relationships. I mean, because I think any fundraiser will tell you that fundamentally it's all about relationships. And then you need to add to that someone who's a really good storyteller, because you have to, you know, you have to have that storytelling ability. And someone who's, as you all have been saying, passionate, authentically passionate about what is going on here. Because I mean, I think in the same way that students can sniff out somebody who's insincere in their love and passion, I think donors have the same nose. So somebody who's passionately committed to what they're doing, can tell a great story, can develop relationships with people, and then, you know, has the courage in some ways to ask someone for a lot of money. because it does take a bit of a leap. And also someone who's a learner, because the professionals in your development shop are going to be helpful guides in this. You know, they have a lot of experience working with a range of people in fundraising, and so somebody has to have that learning gene and show that they're willing to try new things that they've never done before.
I think one of the things for me that is most important is that the new president value the doers at Berklee. You know, Berklee being built by musicians, you know, for musicians, and looking towards developing the people who are here. You know, helping that next generation. You know, many of whom are retiring now. You know, but the people who attended Berklee or taught here for many years and rose up through leadership and really helped drive the student experience because they themselves were students, or they, you know, have interacted with students on such an intimate level. Right, so I think it's important that the new president really values, you know, the doers here and not just the professionalized educators.
My comment is going to be a little bit in direct conflict with the development suggestion. I've worked at campuses where I felt like a president was selected only for development reasons, and then they're never there. And so that would be in direct conflict with what a lot of folks are saying around the importance of accessibility and the president having a presence on our campus. So I think obviously super important, and I can totally value and understand the importance of development experience or willingness to prioritize that, as long as it's not at the cost of meaning that they're never here because they're always on the road.
And that balance is just, you know, and sometimes it changes over time, right? You know, if someone's in a campaign, they may be on the road more, but when they're here, they've got to really be here. But I hear you. I mean, a new president in particular, you know, really needs to get to know the campus, and if they get sent out on the road right away, it can be very difficult. And they don't necessarily have all those stories either that they need to have. Anything else?
So Mary, another thing I've heard you speak about that I think our colleagues here might be interested in is just how, as a search firm, you go about finding this kind of candidate that we're describing, because this is not a typical college president job. And I've heard you speak about this, I think.
Right, we get our cloning machine out. We've been talking a lot about competencies and characteristics, and you know, talent comes in many different places, and so that's going to be, you know, really important. And I think that this institution has demonstrated, and many people point to Roger's leadership in higher ed, you know, as a great example how someone who can come from outside higher ed with certain competencies, really clearly, great communicator, really authentic guy, loves music and curious about music, passionate about music, has run a large complex organization, knows how to scale an organization, and has a good financial and strategic acumen. So you think about those competencies, and then we're going to be, you know, trying to identify people who fit those. We will clearly be looking for folks who have been in higher education at programs and schools, or that have the music and theater and dance. So we'll definitely look in that. There could be other people who are in higher education. Maybe that's not their personal discipline, but they've shown a great interest and support in that area, and they might find this school to be very interesting. We're going to be looking for places, we're going to be looking at institutions that are highly entrepreneurial, and then go within that and try to, you know, identify people who have a passion for music. We're going to be doing a lot of sourcing of people who have been at the kinds of institutions we've described, people in the music industry, you know, people who have affiliations with this school and other schools. And we're going to talk with a lot of people too, and give them an update on where Berklee's at and what it's looking for, and ask for their suggestions. So this is going to be very much you know, we're going to be targeting certain people. We're going to be out there sourcing a lot of people. And I think the search committee's hope is that they'll see people coming from a number of different places We always say to our clients that if you all you want to do is look at the people who are leading the best music schools, then you will get the person who's the best of that lot who's interested in coming. But if you look at that group of people and people from other entrepreneurial educational institutions, and maybe from the music industry, and maybe from an entrepreneurial organization that's got a passion for music, and you see the best in all of those, then you're going to hold everybody to higher standards all across the board. So that really, I think, is our hope. But it's going to be a lot of calling people and having good conversations and networking. We also will do a lot of we've done a lot of research already to identify who is leading specific organizations, and they will help us as we create kind of this bigger and connected web. But we think we'll talk to a lot of interesting people in the next few weeks, next few months.
I think talking about all these plans for the future, we also have to look back just for a second and thank Roger for what he did for the school, because I was just talking with some of my colleagues, and when Roger came in, I mean, he's a great listener, as you described him, and I remember when he asked us, faculty, what we would most like to see improve in our lives at Berklee. And a lot of the faculty said that we would like to see this, our position in the world, Berklee's position, more respected, to be a more respectable place. We had some issues, on many levels before Roger came, that made us a little less respectable than we would have liked, such as the audition process or even the curriculum, or just a lot of other things that the way we were a city campus without really none of a landmark that would distinguish ourselves, such as the 160 massive building became. So there were on many levels issues that could have been improved, and Roger took the time as with students, with faculty as well, to listen and be empathetic to our wishes. And that's a great feeling to go into a room of people. Where do you work? I teach at Berklee College of Music. Oh, that's great. That's an amazing institution. Instead of hearing, oh, okay, Berklee's cool. And then you have to correct that now we are a college. And the other thing is that it's good to remember that he also went in wanting to know the student's life. He would take an audition with the students as he came in. So he did a lot of things that people who genuinely love music and genuinely love to be a leader of a college would do. Not necessarily a professional musician or an academic, but somebody who was bursting with this love for the idea to be the leader of a creative music school. And that's important. We have to find somebody like that.
Well, thank you all so much. We'll wait up here if people have anything in addition. And let me turn it back to Marty. Yeah.
So to give everybody a sense of what happens next, as I mentioned earlier, we post the job description next week. We hopefully, we start reaching out to candidates. We want to develop a diverse list of candidates. And that's something that the search committee is going to be responsible for holding the search firm to, that we get a wide variety and a deep diversity of candidates. That process will probably take 2 months to get a long list of folks that we then have to start to winnie down. We'll have a few rounds of interviews. We'll probably interview somewhere between 8 to 12 people off a list of maybe 200. And then we'll narrow that list down from 8 to 12 to 1 to 2. If it all goes smoothly, hopefully sometime in late spring, early summer, we'll have a recommendation to make to the Board of Trustees on who we think the next president of Berklee should be. We do have the luxury, though, since Roger has said he's willing to stay through June of 2021, that if we don't find a good list of candidates or we're not happy with the finalists that do rise to the top, to continue and send the search firm back, to look and continue into the fall. Our hope is that doesn't happen because we think we will attract a really interesting list of folks who might be interested in running Berklee, and we think that we'll be able to hopefully find the best person for Berklee and get everyone excited that this is Roger, not 16 years ago, but Roger today, who has a vision to take the school to the next level. Thanks, everybody. We don't want to hold people up, but Mary and I will be here right after if you have any other questions or comments. Thanks.